Welcome to Ogma's Oratory, and we are live and on the air. And let me go ahead and get this set up here. We'll go ahead and bring in Rebecca. There we go.
How's everybody doing tonight?
So yeah, we're having some issues with the green screen or with the green screen stuff. So let's see if I can fix that. But tonight's show, we've got a couple of things going on, and I'm going to check real quick just because. There we go.
How's everybody doing tonight?
Okay, everybody can hear both of us, so we're good to go there. Tonight's show, we're the title is Bindings, Hexes, and Curses. But before we get to that, I'd like to talk a little bit about the time of year because, well, it's you say, are you there? Yeah, yes, John, we're here. Next Monday, I believe. Monday is spring equinox, which is known as Ostara, and it's the middle of spring. And anybody in Denver, or I guess in Colorado, I don't know. You're in the spring, so I'm assuming the temperatures are nice and warm like they are here.
Oh, they've been wonderful, but my mother on the Northeast has been getting hammered with snow.
Yes, and it really does depend on where you're at, and it's been interesting because I kind of expected this. We've got La Nina going out on the West Coast. Instead of El Nino, it's La Nina. And usually when that happens, we get no snow at the beginning of winter, no snow at the end of winter, but we get dumped on in the middle, which is exactly what happened in December and January. And so I have not expected a lot of moisture this part of the year. I'm hoping that we get lots of thunder showers come the end of March through the summer. I need to plant some grass seed, and I'd like to see lots of rain to make the grass grow. We need the moisture.
Bring me flowers, so.
Yeah. And so, but why do we celebrate Ostara? Why do we celebrate this time of year? What's the purpose of having a holiday? I mean, you don't have a holiday for no reason. Why do we have this holiday? You want to answer or you want me to?
Why don't you go ahead and take this one, because prior to the show I studied up on hexes and curses, not Ostara.
That's fine. So what we do as witches, and I think this goes for most other pagans in general, we mark and acknowledge the change of the seasons. We look at the year as it goes by, as we are as we are going through the year, because when back when our ancestors needed to know when to plant, they needed to know when to harvest, and so by going through and marking these holidays, marking the days of importance, our ancestors understood where they were in the year and what was going to happen. So spring equinox, when the day and the night are equal in time, is an important time to mark. It means that we're about to plant. It's almost time to start. Things are about to come to fruition. We're about to find an abundance of food in the summer, and we need to know that. We need to be able to recognize that. So we celebrate the rebirth, as Kat says, the rebirth of the world and of the plants, the animals. At this point, animals are having their young. Apparently, there's a live webcam at a zoo in New York. They're still expecting April the giraffe to give birth any moment now. Of course, they've been saying that for about 6 weeks. So we look at this time, we register this time, we acknowledge this time as the rebirth of the planet, the rebirth of the animals, and for all intents and purposes, the rebirth of us. So it's an important time to mark. It wasn't until I became a witch that I started to realize why bunny rabbits laid eggs at Easter. Now I understand. As a Christian, I'm going, well, what does this have to do with the resurrection of Christ? Well, it doesn't. It's all pagan. Eggs and rabbits. What do rabbits do? They multiply very well. So they're both fertility symbols. They're celebrating the fertility. They're symbols of this time of the year, the fertility of what's going on around us. And while your calendar says spring begins next Monday, it began back at Imbolc back on February 2nd. We're in the middle of spring now. And like I said, those of us in Colorado, we actually understand that. We're getting that. On the East Coast, not so much. On the East Coast, they're packing snow. But that too is a sign of spring. The snow, especially when it's that wet, heavy stuff, the spring snow, that is absolutely a sign of spring. And I fully expect to get at least one of those storms. I don't know that it'll be a big one, but I fully expect to get one spring snowstorm that will be wet and heavy and gone the next day. That is a rite of spring. That's exactly what goes on with spring. So that's what we're celebrating, and why we're celebrating here come next week is the fact that we are coming back to that rebirth, and we're getting the longer days, the warmer days, and we're celebrating that our winter food stores, which are almost depleted, only have to last a very little bit longer. We can start to pick our food and get food from the plants and animals that are growing around us. So that's why we celebrate Ostara. So let's go ahead and get back to our main topic tonight, which is bindings, hexes, and curses. First off, I want to make it very clear that bindings, hexes, and curses, no matter what they are, who does them, they are a form of black magic. They are. It is a magic where you are forcing your will upon someone else, and because you're forcing your will on them, it is black magic. You're not allowing them their free will to do what they will. So it is absolutely a form of black magic. A couple ways. Well, let's go back a little ways. Was it the beginning of this month when you asked me if I'd seen this spell?
Yes, it was just around the beginning. No, I think it was towards the end of February is when the article
Yeah,
came
it was.
out, and I sent it to you.
You're right. It was before the 24th, because that was when it was supposed to happen. And
Yep.
And as some of you may have realized, we're running this show a week late. And the reason for that was last week when we were supposed to be doing this show, I had been subpoenaed to testify as a witness, and so I wasn't able to be here. I actually had to be somewhere else. Legally had to be somewhere else, which is a whole lot of fun. No, it's not. It's not fun at all. But so that's why we're running this a week later than normal. But when she got a hold of me and said, "Hey, have you seen this?" My reply was, and we're doing this through chat. And my reply was splat, sigh, splat. I just like, really,
Both of us just kind of rolled our eyes.
really.
Yeah. Now, John, I see what you're saying there. Any defensive magic is black magic. No, that is untrue. Uh, Magic that is done in self-defense is different than imposing your will on somebody else.
Correct.
And I actually used an example with Greyheart just before the show, and I'll go ahead and tell you what it is now. The way my home is set up, everybody has protective spells around their home. If you don't, you probably should have one. Um, but mine has its protective bubble, and then on top of that, it has pockets in it that are easily broken through. And inside of those pockets, I have my version of defensive magic. And what it does is it reaches out, latches on to whatever it comes at the house that's trying to attack the house. It grabs hold of it, follows the signal back, and messes with them. And it's strictly because it's in self defense of them attacking my home. So self defensive magic is not necessarily black magic. It is a form of karma in and of itself. It's helping the universe to enforce its own will.
Well,
Okay.
and John, being a martial artist, will understand that to defend doesn't mean to strike back. It simply means to keep from being hit. Um,
Yes.
all right, so he's asking, aren't bitings, etc., part of defensive magic? I wouldn't consider them defensive. I would consider them offensive, because you are
Exactly.
just as when you are fighting, when you an offensive move is when you strike out. That's what you're doing as with a binding or a hex or a curse. You're striking out. You are
Now
pushing energy.
there are some instances where a binding spell is part of defensive magic, and I would argue this. Let's say that you're in an abusive relationship and you can't get out, so you cast a binding spell on your partner because you are being abused. Okay, that gives you the opportunity to have that moment of escape, of breaking free. That is self-defense. That is not black magic. Okay.
All right,
Um,
I would go that, because you're using it in order to give you the space you need in order to remove yourself from the situation.
Correct. But the binding spell that was done on Trump is not that at all.
No, it's not. It's not at all. And I actually
The
have
binding
got pulled up.
spell, yeah,
Go
the
ahead.
binding spell in and of itself is designed not only to stop Trump's actions, but to stop everybody around him. It is designed to hurt Trump, and it is designed to hurt the people around him. If you're doing a binding, the intention is not to hurt. It is to
Restrict.
stop somebody from hurting you.
Right. Right. That's
So
part of the problem. So this binding spell, the first one was February 24th, and then they talk about, do it. They were going to do it February 24th at midnight, and then each waning crescent moon for the next 12 months, or for as long as he's in office, I guess is what it was, each month.
yep.
So they want people to every month take time and repeat this spell. Now, I will admit I didn't look at this spell until tonight, because I've been busy doing other things. I've been working a lot of hours, and this other thing where I had to actually testify has taken up a lot of time. I looked at this spell tonight, and my first thought was, this person has no clue what they're doing. They absolutely have no idea what they're doing or how things work magically. The first thing that I noticed on this was that they are using the Tower card for a binding. All right, so the Tower card in the tarot, its meaning, its basic, most simplest way to explain the Tower card is it is extremely fast change. It is change that is so swift that you cannot keep up. That does not sound like a binding. That is the opposite of a binding. That is when you bind someone, you are restricting them. You're keeping them from doing anything. Tower card is the exact opposite. Change, absolute extreme change, and extremely quickly. It's not.
And halfway through the ritual, you're supposed to invert it. So now, not only are they asking for a very, very fast change, in addition to that, they're asking for him to actually come out on top with this, and that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Right. Exactly. Why would you use the Tower card? Well, I know why they use the Tower card, because they took the Tower's meaning to be that which you see a lot in TV and movies. It's destruction. Well, that's not what it means. Not at all. That's not in any way does that mean destruction. It simply means extremely fast and extreme amounts of change. Justice would have been a better card.
Well, I actually think one of the cups cards would have been better, and I forget exactly which cups card it is, but it's the one where you're looking out and you see all the things that you want, but you can't get them.
Okay, not the Nine of Cups then, because the Nine of Cups is seeing what will happen and being able to make changes to get that. Explain why
Well,
cups.
maybe it's the inversion one.
Okay, explain why cups.
Well, the reason why I would say cups is because it represents things that you have, things that you can control, things that you can make changes to. So if they really want to stop him from making changes and not having the resources that he has, then I would suggest a cups card.
And its element is water, and water, it corresponds to emotion
And change.
and change. Yes, ever ever changing, like water. It never stops moving.
Hmm.
And
But
yes,
that's aside from the point. This
sure,
this whole binding ritual bothers me, and the reason
ritual.
why, yeah, and the reason why is because they are actively trying to hurt. They're actively trying to harm Donald Trump and the people around him. If it was, if it was, if it was a matter of the Dakota pipeline, for instance, okay, and
Hmm.
they were doing a binding spell to keep the, the access line from going through, then I can understand it because that's not a person, and you're not doing harm. That's that's something that's it's I don't want this to be signed. Please don't sign this. That's what that binding spell is. It's encouraging those who would have signed off on it to rethink it. The binding spell that's out right now that everybody's doing on Trump is encouraged to harm him and the people around him.
And
It's calling on
honestly,
angels, it's calling on demons, it's calling on
yeah,
ancestors,
yeah.
it's calling on harm.
Honestly, I think that it's a lot of that the people around Trump are, a lot of them are keeping him from doing worse than he already is. Now, understand, Trump was not my choice for president, but he is president. The people spoke, and so he is in that position of power for the next 4 years at least. But
And I want to stress that this is not about Trump. This is about doing a mass binding spell on somebody that's
and how
going
not
to
to
do
do it,
harm to them.
how not to do it. This I'm
Simply
looking.
don't do it. I mean, look at the Wiccan Reed.
Yeah, well, I'm
Okay,
looking at this ritual version 2.2. They couldn't get it right the first time, so they've got a second major and a second minor revision to this. And the first thing it says: "Hear me, O spirits of water, earth, fire, and air, heavenly hosts, demons of the infernal realms, and spirits of the ancestors." Well, first off, if you're Wiccan or a witch, why would you be calling on demons? Those are not things that we deal with. Those are other spiritual paths. And if you do deal with them, those are not nice. They do not just come and do whatever you ask. It takes
no,
a lot of power
those
and a
are
lot of
malevolent
energy.
spirits.
What?
Those are malevolent spirits.
Correct. Those
They
are
they come to do harm.
correct. And the only way you're going to get them to do what you want them to do is have some power over them. And I guarantee you that the majority of witches out there have no idea how that's done. You wouldn't know how to do that unless you were into ceremonial magic, and even then, you probably don't. That's
And
some
then
deep shit.
let's also take into account the last time that we spoke. I think it was our last webcast. Um, when we spoke, we said don't call on things that you don't know how to put back into the box. Okay?
Yeah,
So if you have no background with these things, if you have no experience with these things, and you start calling on them and you don't know how to get them back in the box, it's going to come back and bite you hard.
yeah. Never conjure something you can't banish. Absolutely. First rule. When I teach students, the first thing I teach them is how to banish things. I don't teach them how to call quarters. I teach them how to banish quarters, because you need to be able to get rid of it, whatever it is, and before you can call it. And yeah, that's just irresponsible. Absolutely
You don't
irresponsible.
walk into a tiger cage with nothing except your clothes on. You
Right.
just don't. Because that door is going to lock behind you and you've got no way to get out unless you've got the key.
Right. Right. You know,
But
I understand. I understand that there are a lot of people out there. A lot of them are friends of mine who do not like Trump and what he's doing. I understand that, but that does not give you or them or anyone else the right to to impose their will on someone else. Um,
Raven Song, I agree with what you said.
Yeah, I
The
was just
universe
reading.
does, yeah, the universe a lot of times looks out for itself. So most likely what they're doing, it's not going to work anyways. If anything, it might come back on them. That is absolutely true.
And
Um,
that goes.
they are claiming some success at this point,
They are.
but that doesn't mean yes, they are
Ow.
claiming success.
Ow.
Hang on, I actually think I brought up the story earlier. Give me just a second.
Okay, I don't see any difference. But the thing of it is that the universe, reality, has a balance, just like nature does, and we all understand that in nature, if you play with that balance, it has extremely far-reaching consequences. Removing a single organism from a habitat can cause entire species to go extinct because the food chain. Same thing happens in reality in general. You start messing with that balance, and that's what this is doing. And you don't know what you're doing. You have all sorts of consequences that you never intended and never expected to happen because you didn't think it through. And this is one of those spells that wasn't thought through. This looks like something, honestly, this looks like something that a first year person going through their year and a day course would have written up and handed in as a bad example of a spell. It's just horrible. And, like I said, I have no love for Donald Trump. I didn't vote for the guy. But the thing of it is, it doesn't matter. I didn't like Obama either. He was, in other ways, he was just as bad. You're never going to get someone in that position who people are genuinely going to like. There are very few presidents, certainly in my lifetime, that I can say that even the people who didn't like them at least respected them. I can only think of one.
Well, it doesn't even have to be a president.
Exactly.
That's the thing here. This
Right.
is a mass binding spell that is obviously done by an amateur who has no idea the things that they're calling forward, and they're asking other people to get in on this.
Right.
And people are following so blindly because they are so upset at what's going on around them.
And they don't know
they
better.
can't see the forest for the trees.
Right. And they don't know any better. This went out through Facebook. Well, okay, I know that I trust everything I read on Facebook, don't you?
Oh my God.
And so, you've got a whole bunch of people who may or may not understand how magic works, how spells work, all putting energy into this thing, because you don't have to know anything about magic to put energy into something. People do it every day. You want something really bad, you're putting energy into it. You work on a project, you create something with your hands, you're putting energy into it. So we've got all of these people through Facebook, and Facebook serves over 1 billion people now. There are over 1 billion users of Facebook. That's 1/7 of the planet's population. Imagine, yes, and it's global. Imagine the power that might have when you try and do something. This is completely insane. Yes, I agree. Trump is claiming success on a lot of things also. That's what he does.
I'm trying really hard not to turn this into a Trump session. So
well, and I agree.
I'm gonna
but that's
here for,
that's part of the that's how politics works. You claim.
Well, I get that, but this isn't about Trump. This is about
Correct.
a mass binding spell that is being done incorrectly and harming people.
Correct.
So I'm gonna redirect here for a minute.
Sure, go ahead.
Let's go over the meaning of what a hex is, what a curse is,
Sure.
what a jinx is, so that the people that are listening in know what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought you were going to.
Okay, so a hex is basically any kind of a spell or magical working that is aimed at another person that is specific towards doing harm towards them or towards a situation that has harmed someone. Um, they can be called hexes, they can be called curses, they can be called jinxes. Um, there are little tiny differences between them. A hex is typically something that is a little bit more ritualized, whereas a curse is something that's usually something that's spoken. But either can be done. It depends on where you learned. And a jinx can mean one of two things. A jinx can either be you have been jinxed or cursed or hexed, or you are causing a jinx. For instance, I was watching a show at one point, and there was a British gentleman on a ship, and he believed that he was a jinx to the ship. So he grabbed a cannonball and sank himself to the bottom of the ocean to remove the jinx from the ship. He just thought he had in general bad luck.
Right.
So that's kind of the idea of a jinx.
Right. And a binding is exactly what it sounds like. It is a way to restrict another person from doing something, usually something harmful. Typically, you're going to restrict, you're going to bind someone to keep them from harming you or people who you are responsible for. And that's the other part of this, is that, you know, as citizens of this country and the world, we're not responsible for anyone but ourselves. And Kat's asking if anybody set up a counterspell to this, and as far as I know, no one has. I don't know. It certainly didn't get near the publicity this one did. I simply didn't do anything. I refused to add my energies to it in any way. This will work out the way it works out, and should work out as it's supposed to. I honestly don't believe that, because of the way that this spell was written, and the fact that I suspect, I can't say for a fact, I suspect that pretty much anybody who understands what's trying to be done here has backed away from it. Yeah, they're not going to touch it with a 10-foot pole. So it's going to be people who have no real knowledge or skill trying to do this. So I expect that at best nothing happens. At worst, it backfires badly on those who took part in it. Yeah.
Well, there's something else to it that it kind of bugged me. Where is it?
And you know.
Okay, here it is.
Okay.
After you invert the tarot card, you say, I beseech thee in my name, and you say your full name.
Right.
One of the first things that I was taught was never, ever to attach my name to something that wasn't specific towards healing, love, and light, and things like that. If I was going to go after somebody, I was not going to put my name on it.
Right.
And the reason why is because it comes back and it hits you that much harder and that much faster, because it can pinpoint you now.
You know, it's interesting. I don't know. You know, Kat's asking about other people who may have tried to stop this spell. I don't know honestly don't know how many conservative witches there are out there. I think we're fairly rare. But I would suspect that if anybody, it would be those witches who are conservative in their thought. May have done something to try and stop this. But you're right, the threefold law. The threefold law, in its most basic form, says that whatever energy you put out will return to you at some point with 3 times the energy you originally put into it. That's the.
I have it right here.
Go ahead.
Abide the Wiccan law ye must, in perfect love and perfect trust. 8 words the Wiccan read fulfill, and ye harm none, do what ye will. What ye send forth comes back to thee, so ever mind the rule of 3. Follow this with mind and heart, merry ye meet, and merry ye part.
Yeah, and that is a classic text that has been around. I think Doreen Valiente wrote that. It's been around for 50, 60 years, and it absolutely explains that you are responsible for everything you do. No one else. You are responsible for your actions, and therefore, whatever you do will come back to you. Now, there are a bunch of people who seem to think that the threefold law acts like karma. They'll call it karma. I want to I want to dispute that. Karma is a Hindu concept that says what you do in this life will have a direct correlation on how you are going to reincarnate in the next life and what that life is like. Karma has nothing to do with the threefold law. It's simply a phrase, a term that Americans think they're familiar with, and so it gets used a lot. Threefold law says that at some point in the future, it doesn't say when because there's no way to determine, whatever you do now will come back to you. So if you are doing good things, if you are helping people, if you are giving back to your community, then you should get that energy back with 3 times the amount of energy you originally put in. If you are doing harmful things, if you are being selfish, if you are not helping others, if you are just in general being a bad person, that's the kind of energy you will get back. Now, people say, well, yeah, but who cares? That's a one-time thing. No, it's not. We all know people out there who always continuously seem to have this cloud of, this dark cloud over them, excuse me, where nothing they do goes right. Everything they try and do just falls apart. No matter what it is, no matter how well planned and how well executed, nothing ever happens good to them. It's always horribly wrong. Well, that's the threefold law. They have been putting out negative energy so long and so much that it's returned to them, and it is keeping them from growing and doing the things they want to do because they apparently wouldn't allow others to do that as well. It's coming back to them and it's causing the problems. This is how that energy works. It returns to you and it creates the problems. I won't say it creates, it keeps things from happening the way you want them to, because you are putting out negative energy. That negative energy is returning to you and creating problems for you.
Creating the balance that's necessary.
Correct.
You put out the negative energy, you're going to get it back. The universe needs to stay in balance. Now, you'll notice that I laughed a little bit earlier. That was Kat's comment. Call out a demon and tell them your name. No problem. You will be safe. Ha, ha, ha. That was what I was laughing at. That was really funny.
Yeah, I just saw that.
Yeah, Ravensong actually brought up a good point. He says, a lot of times you have to remember a binding spell also binds it to yourself. So whenever you're binding somebody from doing something, it's very likely that you will feel direct effects of taking that action. And that is true. When you work magic, okay, anytime that you work magic and you send it out, it leaves a tether. That, at least that's what I was taught. There is always a line drawing it back home to you. So when you send out a binding, you're going to feel the effects come back to you, just like what I described with my house. When they send out something towards my house that attacks my house, it latches onto that signal and goes right back. It's just like a telephone. It works both ways. So, I mean, if you're comfortable with getting the blowback for this and you think you can't be touched and you're going to lay down the scunion, go for it. Go for it. You are one less person I need to worry about, because it's going to come back and it's going to bite you hard.
You know, I've been practicing for almost 30 years now, and I'm not that powerful. It's just amazing. You know, and the other thing in here talks about, you know, because they're using the Tower card, which we have already talked about why that's not going to work. And then they invert the card, so they turn it upside down. Okay, you know, it's I'll show you something. I have, I'll put it up on the screen. This is my technical difficulties plate, and the reason it is because it is absolutely appropriate. Something has gone wrong, and we have, you know, extreme fast change, probably not in the best way, and I'm working to try and correct that. But it, you know, absolutely. But that's the correct interpretation of that card. So you're going to start with this, and you're going to cause extreme change, and then halfway through it says invert the Tower tarot card. Okay, so we've got extreme fast and extreme change, and now we want to invert it. Well, what does inverting do? It pretty much reverses whatever it is that meaning is for that card is. So instead of extreme massive fast change, you want extreme slow stability, Really? I thought you were trying to stop him from doing stuff, and you want to give him stability? Okay, I don't see how this is going to work. I just don't see it. This is an extremely poorly written spell. It has no forethought whatsoever as far as the correspondences they're using and how they are going to work within the spell. People ask why correspondences are important, and what it comes down to is it's symbology. It's the correspondences are symbolic representations, substitutions, if you will. When you are working with magic and you're using correspondences, well, let's start with a typical Wiccan ritual. We have 4 candles around the circle. We have a yellow one in the east. Why? Because yellow is the correspondence to east and the rising sun. We have a red one in the south. Why? Because red is the correspondence to fire, which is the element of the south. We have a blue one in the west, because blue is correspondence to water, and water is the element of west. And then we have a green one in the north, because north is earth, and green corresponds to that element. So we have these correspondences. Those are very basic correspondences that I think most people understand.
Well, that also depends on how you were taught, because depending on where you are and who taught you, that can be different.
Absolutely. I'm talking about traditional Wiccan ritual here.
Yeah, for me, it's very different.
Hmm.
But as far as which corners are called and which element corresponds to them, it can be different depending on who you studied under and where you're at.
Right. Right. Absolutely. But those are basic correspondences. Those are color correspondences based on elements. Okay. But there are other correspondences. When you're writing ritual, you want to bring in helpers, for lack of a better term. You want to bring in things that can help you with whatever spell you want. And so, they bring in an unflattering picture of the subject of the binding in this case. Okay, I understand that. Unflattering picture is a way, a form of making that person look bad, but it is a symbolic representation of that person, same as a puppet would be. Puppet doesn't have to look anything like the person. As long as you ritually name it this person, it takes their place.
Hmm.
There are a lot of correspondences that you can use in order to do whatever ritual work you want done. But a lot of this stuff that they're pulling in, they're talking about, I beseech thee in my name, and you say your full name, in the name of all who walk, crawl, swim, or fly, of all the trees, the forests, streams, deserts, rivers and seas. All right, so you're trying to bring in the entire planet? I'm not sure how that works. I'm not sure why the planet would care. The planet is much bigger than a single person, whoever that person is. If you were trying to do a binding on pollution, that I could see. If because pollution harms the environment, so you would call in all of the elements and all of these parts of the planet to help in cleansing the earth. Now, don't be surprised when you find all sorts of extreme storms, because that's the way that it's going to work. You're going to get hurricanes, tornadoes, all sorts of tempests that weren't necessarily normal, because that's how the planet cleans itself. You have to understand the consequences of what it is you're doing. If you're going to bind someone, typically you're going to do it for your own safety. I can't. Your own safety or the safety of others. I
Well,
told.
it
Yes.
isn't even the safety of others, because if you look at the way it's written, it says, I call upon you to bind Donald J. Trump. And then the next paragraph down, it says, and to bind to those who enable his wickedness and those whose mouth speaks his poisonous lies. That is
Pretty much everybody in his
Across
administration.
the United States.
Yeah, that's the entire administration. I love the comment Kat just put in. I beseech thee in my name, I'm a Demas, to do my will. yeah, exactly. All right. So there was a spell. I and a group of others did years and years and years ago. Back when I was first learning witchcraft, it was black magic. We all understood it was black magic when we did it, and I've told this story before. I was living in Capitol Hill. I was in my 20s, and there was a rapist in the neighborhood. He had sent several girls to the hospital because he wasn't just raping them, he was also stabbing them. And so we decided as witches that we were going to do something about this. This was unacceptable to us. So we were going to do something about it. And we did. We put a binding spell on him that by his own actions and deeds he would be caught. And he was within a week. Now, that's all well and good. We did it for the better.
We set it up as that he would be caught through his actions and deeds.
Correct, because that's the proper way to do it. You don't keep him from doing what he's going to do. You simply make the consequences of what he's going to do catch up to him or her. And excuse me. And the other thing is that we all suffered for a very long time the price of that spell. That spell had a high cost to all of us because nothing is free. Everything you do has a cost to it. And if you don't understand that, you shouldn't be doing magic, especially black magic.
Now, speaking of this, there are a couple of things that you can do to check yourself. Now, I want to make sure that everybody understands that if you are going to perform any kind of a black magic, a dark magic, whatever you want to call it, it is your discretion. But take that with a grain of salt, because that does not mean that you get free reign to do what you want, because there are consequences every time. No matter what anybody tells you, there are repercussions. So some of the things that you can ask yourself to see if you really, really want those repercussions in your life, if this is such a need. I actually have a list in front of me. The first one is, does this spell need to be done? Is there really a need for justice to happen, or will justice happen on its own if I let it be and let the universe handle it? Another one is, do I have the right to do this spell? Am I directly involved, or is somebody who's directly involved asked me to do it? The next one is, do I feel strongly that I should be doing this? Is this right in my head? The next one is, do I have all of the facts? Is there something that's missing, something that's not being told to me? Do I know for certain what I've been told is true? Another one is, have I done any kind of a divination, whether it be tarot or pendulum or scrying, whatever you want to do? Have you done any kind of a reading or a scrying to let you know that you're on the path that you're supposed to take, or what the repercussions in the future might be for you and whether or not you can handle them? Another one is, do I have permission from the victims involved? If you're not a part of this, but there are several victims and only one of them comes to you, you need to ask yourself, do I have permission from all of the victims? Does this one person represent them? Do I need to ask them individually? And then finally, do I want to invite this into my life? And the reason why is because it will come back to you. It may be something small, it may be something large, it depends on how you do it. Do you want to invite that into your life? Is this enough of a hardship on you to invite that into your life? Those are questions that I encourage you to ask and have solid answers to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before you attempt to do any kind of a curse or a binding or a hex or a jinx or anything like that.
And I
be aware of these.
I expect that a majority of the people who are doing this, on that one question you asked, do I have permission from the victims? I have no doubt that a majority of the people who actually went through with this ritual felt that they were a victim, and so therefore they had permission because they had their own permission. And that's not the way it works. They are not the only victim. They are one out of many because when you're talking about someone who is head of state, their decisions, their choices are going to affect everybody in the country, not just a single person. It doesn't work that way. So you may be you may be a victim. You may feel victimized, but you're not the only one. And that's something you have to take very seriously. Now, and I was telling Rebecca before we came on the air. Next time she'll get me a list of things when she talks about that, so I can actually have the words up on the screen as she's talking about them, so you can see it. Because it is a much better. It's much more effective when you can read what she's saying as well as hear her say it. But the thing of it is that it's been my experience that those witches who seriously take the time to meditate, contemplate, and think out the consequences of what they want to do are few and far between. Then you have those few witches, and I've talked to many of them, who say, well, I don't do magic. And I want to make sure that you understand, we're not saying don't do magic. We're not saying don't do bindings or curses or hexes. We're simply trying to educate you as to what is going to be involved if you decide that that's what you want to do. But I have talked to witches in the past who said, well, I don't do magic. And the reason they gave was because the threefold, the witch's reed says, and harm none, do as you will. They are so afraid that anything they do is going to harm someone, somewhere, sometime, that they refuse to do magic. And I'm looking at them going, that's not the way it works. It's not a matter of, you can't harm anyone anytime. It's a matter of, will what you are doing cause harm in directly? Okay? Indirect consequences, nobody can tell you what those are going to be. Everything you do is going to cause harm indirectly somehow, some way. If you eat, I don't care if you're vegan or a carnivore like myself, you're killing something in order to survive. You're causing harm. But you have to do it if you're going to survive. It's part of life. You are going to cause harm. So how can you cause the least amount of harm when you are doing this stuff? And if you go at it understanding that whatever you do is probably going to cause someone some harm. And these are the things, now you start looking at, these are the things that I can do to minimize that harm to other people. If it happens to me, it happens to me. I'm responsible for my actions, and therefore I'm the one who should be getting any blowback. I expect that if I'm going to be doing a ritual. If I'm doing magic, I expect that I'm going to pay whatever price there is to be paid. I don't expect or accept others paying the price for me. And that's one of the problems with this spell, is that it expects others to pay that price. It expects those who don't necessarily understand what it is that's being done or how it's being done to pay the price by lending energy to this poorly thought out and written spell that shouldn't ever have seen the light of day.
Actually, I forget exactly where I read it, but on this particular binding spell, there was something in here about how don't worry about karma catching up with you because it's written in such a way that it won't. Don't believe that. Do not believe that. It's not true. Not the way it's written, not who it goes after, not any of it. It is not true. There will be consequences.
Yeah, I'm looking at chat, and Kat's saying that she's got a friend there. And he wants to know if anyone knows exactly who started this binding spell. I don't know that anybody does.
I don't know who started it, but I know that on the website that I got it off of, the writer's name is Michael M. Hughes. He claims to be a writer, speaker, and magical thinker. Let's see. There is an official Bind Trump group on Facebook.
Does not surprise me. There's a group for everything. It's interesting.
And he finishes his article with "Happy binding magical people."
Huh?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the finishing note to his article is "Happy binding magical people."
Wow. It's interesting. I actually got as most people watching live know, I run a meetup group every other Friday. I actually got someone who wanted to join the group because he read about this binding spell, and he's a journalist and wants to know more. It's like, okay.
Oh boy.
I hope he's watching. I really do. But
This is like when 50 Shades of Grey came out and all of the BDSM people
yeah,
smacked their foreheads and went, "That is not what we really do."
that's not what we do. Yeah, exactly.
All of the 50 Shaders came out of nowhere and said, "Oh, we want to be kinky too because we saw it in a movie," and we're like, "Okay,
Right.
let's
Read
sit
it in a
down and
book.
educate you first."
Yeah,
Now,
I saw it on the internet. It must be true.
John Conley has asked a few times now about morality.
Yes, I was just
Um,
going to go there.
yeah, I'm going to touch on that real quick. As far as morality goes, that's what's in you. What is moral for you? For instance, a little bit earlier on, Ravensong gave us a story about how he was protecting one of his sister's friends and did a binding for them to get out of an abusive relationship. For him, that was his moral compass guiding him. That was, I need to help this situation to stop because it's not okay morally with me. And that's and he says that he did get 3 days worth of blowback on that.
Yeah,
However, that had to do with his moral compass. Was it something he was willing to step in on? Was it something that affected him in such a way that his morals were compromised? Now, not everybody's morals are the same.
yeah.
So when you're talking about the morality of an issue, it really has to do with how you feel about it. Because the way I feel about it could be completely different. It's the difference between pro choice and pro life. There are two very different arguments about that. Both of them have good arguments, both of them have bad arguments, and they want you to pick a side. But it really depends on what your inner morals say.
And Ravensong
It's the
wants you to
same
know
thing with
that
magic.
she's a her.
Sorry.
I knew that, but I was gonna, and I don't disagree with what you're saying. I would change one thing. I consider that the inner part that you decide is correct as ethics and morals being the rules and restrictions that society puts upon you. That's the only difference I would put out there. But I agree with what you're saying. It really comes down to what do you feel is right. And it's interesting. Kat was saying she saw this info for this spell on the Military Pagans Facebook page. Okay, I understand why. If you're gonna do a spell that binds someone, let's get some warriors in on it. On the other hand,
Well, they also have to be careful with that because that can be counted as sedition and treason and
exactly. I was just gonna
trying to
say,
go against the commander in chief. So anybody who's military out there, if you're trying to be active, then be active, but don't get yourself thrown in the brig
right.
because
Because you have taken an oath to protect
yeah,
this country from all enemies within and without, and trying to force the president is considered treason and sedition. That's correct. And honestly,
so
that goes for
careful.
everybody, but it's going to probably be a lot more binding to people in the military because I guarantee you that it's one thing to say for a normal citizen to say, oh, you know what, I really wish that the president would die. That's one thing. Now that can be taken and the Secret Service can actually use that as evidence that you want to kill the president. If you were in the military and you said, I really want the president to die, they're going to take that much more seriously and you will be brought up on charges. Absolutely. They don't joke around with this sort of thing. And so
No, they don't.
the
And
fact that
That
The,
actually happened close to home for me. My mother was stationed in Washington D.C. and she snuck off base one night and was protesting the Vietnam War in front of the White
oh,
House.
wow.
And when the police picked her up, they didn't call her parents.
No, no.
And
If she was in the military, they called her her CO. Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
And
it was an uncomfortable experience for her. She was demoted. She
that's putting it
was
nicely.
given the talking to. She
Yeah.
was There was it's not good. So if you're in the military, I encourage you to please be careful when you're speaking directly about POTUS because that might get you into a lot of trouble,
You know,
and you're not going to do a whole lot of good in a cell.
the thing of it is, it's quite fine for people to have their opinion. I personally would suggest that it be your opinion, not the opinion given to you by the media, Facebook, or anybody else. Take the time, look things up. Google is your friend. You can
Do
find
the
out,
research.
yeah, you can find out the truth of anything you read, watch, see, or hear, or are told. You can find out that truth in about 30 seconds. If you're watching this, you have the technology. Most people do not. And so I end up getting emails from my cousin that's my dad's generation that have absolutely no bearing in reality whatsoever because it's being spread across the internet because nobody takes the time to Google it and find out.
We'll also use Snopes. Snopes.com is one of those
There are a
wonderful
lot,
websites that you can debunk a
yeah,
lot of myths just by looking
there
at the
are a
link.
lot of resources and you have access, much easier access to them than you would have had similar resources 30 years ago. And honestly, when the president signed his executive order banning travel to this country from several nations in the Middle East, I had a large argument with many people, many of my friends, about what it meant. So I went online, I went to Google, and I typed in text of presidential executive order. And what I got was the full text of that presidential order, which I then read, because it does no good to have the text if you don't know what it says. And I then put up a knowledgeable argument and a link to the article that had that text. And I said, listen, I understand that people are unhappy, but I've read the text, and the only country it named specifically was Syria. It didn't name any others specifically.
And
Uh,
that's the thing right there is we need to actually sit down and read these things. And the reason
and
why is because a lot of us are programmed into instant information. If I can't get a 3 sentence, paragraph from Google describing it, then I don't want to sit down and read it.
the other
Take
thing is,
time, pour yourself a cup of coffee, sit down in a chair, and read the damned article.
is that I made it very clear I was not in favor of that executive order. But I was pointing out the flaws in the arguments, and so I said, listen, here's the link. If you want to have a discussion about this because you disagree, that's fine, but you had better be able to quote the paragraph and sentence or section and paragraph that you are talking about, or there's no point because you are not informed. And there's no point in having a discussion or an argument, for that matter, with an uninformed opponent, because if they're not informed, no matter what you say, you're not going to get them to see your side or any other side. And that is part of the problem, is that you have to inform yourself, because no one is going to inform you. And as witches, as magical people, you have a responsibility to be the best informed person that you know about everything that you have an opinion about. I don't care whether you agree with me or not, as long as you can make a reasoned argument as to why, for or against. As long as it's reasoned, that's fine. We can have a discussion about it. We can agree to disagree. But when you are talking about what you heard on the news or on, whatever, on the radio or wherever it was, your friend told you, all of these protesters say, okay, have you ever gone to a protest? Have you ever asked people protesting why they're there? 99% of them have no clue why they're actually there. Their friends said, we should go to this protest because this is something bad. And so they go. They have absolutely no clue why they're there.
It's either that or they'll give you the general idea. Like, for instance, the women's marches that recently came up. A lot of them were, well, we're here for women's rights and women's rights and women's rights. Which ones? Well, women's rights.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Which ones?
We're here because women are being oppressed. Well,
And
okay.
we can work. We have the right to vote. We have the ability to go out and be among society and be counted as equal to men. What exactly are you talking about as far as women's rights? And then you get the one person who's going to be really snide to you, and they're like, "Oh, well, it's about reproduction and this and that, and men are assholes, and that's
Yes, we are, but that's a different
what I want
conversation.
to talk to."
Well,
Oh
and
gosh,
yeah, and Blue Sage makes a valid point. Too many people look down on the educated. Absolutely. And it's not just politicians mocking science. It's simply, I don't have any degrees. I didn't go to college. I have a standard high school diploma, but I consider myself to be a fairly highly educated person, both because of what I do for a living and because I have an interest in other things. And once the internet came out and Google, once I was able to search for things I have an interest in, now that once that started up, you couldn't stop me from learning because I have an interest.
another great resource for learning is Khan Academy. KHAN. Khan
Yeah,
Academy
yeah.
offers free online college level courses. So, I mean, you can't go wrong with free. You can learn anything you want from college professors
Yes.
any
Yeah.
time of day.
Yes. Now, we're out of time, but I want to get real quick. I just wanted to, the last thing I wanted to say is if knowledge is power, then you need to arm yourself. And whether you agree or disagree with someone, you need to be armed because they're not going to be. Guaranteed 99.99999% of the public is not going to be armed with any form of knowledge. They're going to go with what they heard. You, as an informed individual and witch, have the advantage when you can go back and say, well, I read this, I saw that, here's what it says in black and white. They can't dispute that. And it's the same research that you're going to do in learning witchcraft, in creating spells, in creating rituals. You would do that normally in your practice. You need to be doing that in your life because, as I have said over and over again, your spiritual life and your regular life are not two separate things. They're the same thing. It's just two different sides. You need to be doing this not just in your spiritual life, but in your regular life, your regular day-to-day life. You need to be researching and gathering knowledge so that you understand, if no one else around you does, you understand what you're doing and why. So we're going to call that... Go ahead.
Then one more note.
Mm-hmm.
If you decide that you want to bring curses, hexes, jinxes, or bindings into your form of magic, please ask yourself those questions.
Yeah.
Make sure that you understand what you're getting into. Make sure that you understand the blowback.
Or talk to somebody who you know is knowledgeable. You can always ask questions of someone who's knowledgeable. Yeah. So we're going to call that a show. That went by fast. It was an extremely quick show from my point of view. We'll be back next month, our regular week, which will be second Tuesday of the month, which, real quickly, I look at my magic calendar on my computer that says the second Wednesday is the 12th of April. So we will be back April 12th, and I don't know what probably Beltane will be our topic at that point, unless something more interesting comes along. So we'll see you next month. Everybody have a wonderful
everyone.
Have a wonderful month. Blessed be.